you know, throwing money at the problem, if there is corruption, isn't gonna solve it. So until those issues are addressed and there's sunlight put on a whole variety of issues, throwing money at the problem is a bad idea.
So when you look at the city of Lawrence, it's difficult to answer the question, leaving aside any prospective management issues with the current administration. It's difficult to get around the numbers that you're faced with there. As a former mayor, I can't quote you chapter and verse what those numbers are, but pretty close. City of Lawrence has 100% of their school budget paid for by the state. City of Lawrence has probably more than half of their municipal budget paid for by the state. Now, what's the reason for that? They don't have any property tax revenue. Additionally, I think that in the last round of cuts, and I believe that Mike Sullivan was the mayor, Lawrence took approximately a $12 million local aid cut. Now, that sort of pushed them over the edge. It was formula driven, so it wasn't targeted at Lawrence, but I think it pushed them over the edge. But when you look at those types of numbers, even bringing in a receiver, Chelsea brought in a receiver, but Chelsea had corruption and municipal management problems, but at its core had an ability to fund itself to a large degree. Lawrence does not. So the answers become substantially more complicated. But I think that what you need to look at is when the state funds 100% of your school budget, the state has a responsibility to ensure that the money is being spent properly. And I think that's what the receivership is about, because the state, quite frankly, wasn't satisfied. I don't pass judgment on the receivership, whether it's good or bad, but I think that you can't look at Lawrence's situation without looking at the numbers. And I know politics isn't always a numbers business, but when you look at those numbers, you see that Lawrence has had some opportunities in the past. You've seen cities like Lowell take advantage of those opportunities and do great things for the city. Paul Songus did wonderful things for the city of Lowell, and the city of Lowell even today is benefiting from those things that happened, that brought additional revenues, brought additional people to the city. Lawrence missed some of those chances due to poor management, poor political decisions, and they're paying the price today. It's a complicated question as to how you get out from under today, but those numbers are pretty daunting, and I think everybody ought to look at them. Because if you think that you're going to stop funding K-8 or K-12 education in Lawrence, what it would mean is that the school children in Lawrence would not have an education. So there are difficult issues there, and I think, quite frankly, management issues that need to be addressed that haven't been addressed, but they're going to have to be very soon.
Anything else?
No, I'm good. I don't think any of them actually answered the question, but
Our state,
you're on. Sorry.
our state recently lost 750,000 people, leading to the loss of a congressional seat. According to a CEO opinion poll, Massachusetts has dropped to 47th worst state to do business in. What would you do as state senator to help bring business back to Massachusetts?
Well, I saw that poll too, and it's all CEOs, but then I saw another poll which I thought was pretty interesting. When CEOs have a choice of where to live, they choose places like Boston and Greater Boston. They want access to the culture, they want access to the good schools, they want access to the great health care. So what they say in one survey isn't borne out by their behavior in another. And I found that to be very interesting when I looked at that. Yes, I think CEOs, frankly, have a preconceived, I mean, largely we're talking about wealthier Republican types who have a preconceived notion of Massachusetts as this horrible high tax and unfriendly to business. But frankly, as a business owner, I think Massachusetts has done some good things. Most tax-related issues can be moved on the line. Easy electronic systems, I think there's room for improvement. I don't think DOR needs to be separate from the unemployment office and so on as far as those things go. But we have, I just think it's an unfair comparison when you look at that CEO survey and then look at where CEOs choose to live. But in general, improving the economic environment, Massachusetts ranks lower than most states in its unemployment rate. It's doing the right things. It does have a perception problem, and having coming from an advertising and public relations background, maybe what we need to do is work more on the perception of Massachusetts, as well as work on regulation. But I found the most stifling regulations that developers talk about are at the local levels. And I'm not sure I want the Commonwealth to override local decision-making either. So I think we need to look at that in total.
I think that one of the reasons why we might lose a lot of talent and skilled workers, or maybe aren't as competitive at attracting them, is the cost of housing in our state. I think that drives a lot of people out who might come to Massachusetts for our quality schools, but might feel like they can get more for their dollar in other states. And I think that's a challenge for us, because a lot of our communities are built out. But I think that there is opportunity when it comes to some zoning reform at the state level to allow municipalities to have the type of zoning that's more flexible for the things that would contribute to the workforce, like transit-oriented development. We have, we have the oldest subway system in the country, but we know that we can do better. And it's a missed opportunity not to continue to maintain and expand those, because a lot of people wish they lived closer to the commuter rail, or wish that they could hop on a bus that was more frequent in their scheduling. So I think that if we continue to be a place where there is good investment in infrastructure, and we invest in our sidewalks, our streets, they're safe places to live and work, and things are convenient for people, that's a draw, that's unique. I think that a lot of places in the country, you see a lot of sprawl, you have to drive everywhere, that's expensive, gas is getting more expensive, and I think that what we have that attracts people to our state is that uniqueness, where we do live in close communities, in dense communities, and we have the ability in those places to get from work and home without the use of a car. But I think that we can expand upon that. The term now is our gateway cities, whether it's Haverhill, or in other communities it's Fitchburg, We have underutilized downtowns, we have the potential to revitalize historic buildings, and I think that's what people are looking for, some unique alternative housing, a convenient way to get to work. That's a real niche. So if our alternative is one of two, either we invest in these things or we don't, because we feel this competitive pressure with states like New Hampshire, I'd rather go the other way and continue to be Massachusetts, because I think we should do what works, but do it better.
I think when you look at CEO complaints, some probably a little overstated, some right on the mark. When you're talking about doing better business in Massachusetts, I don't think there's any question that you start with the cost of health care. And I think that, as Tim pointed out, CEOs might like to live here because we all know that Massachusetts probably has the best healthcare delivery system in the world. And everybody wants to be close to good health care. But it costs the most in the world. And so I think when you're looking at either developing new business opportunities, expanding existing business opportunities that might require additional employment, that cost of healthcare is a big disincentive. As somebody that has dealt with permitting, whether it be at the local level or at the state level, can be time-consuming and can be expensive. Most importantly, I think some businesses come in, and notwithstanding the fact that Massachusetts does have plenty of books of regulations, they don't know what the bottom line is. They don't know how long the process is going to take. And when you go to, whether it be zoning meetings, conservation meetings, and you have a development coming in that may be producing jobs, and you see the prospective business owner coming in, and there are 8 guys with them with those nice suits on, that's a lot of money for every one of those meetings. So when those processes go on for 2 and 3 years, it costs a lot of money. We need to make the process predictable, whether it be an up or a down. We need to show business that they can have permits or not have them within a prescribed period of time. And we really need to look at streamlining the appeal process so that everybody has an opportunity to register objections, to have their say. But you can't have situations where permitting battles go on for 5 and 10 years. It's not good for business. It's not good for the residents. It's really not good for anybody. And I think that you need to look at that and try to bring that process to predictability. And you save money for business, and you give less heartburn to constituents.
May I just add one thing?
Absolutely.
With my mention of opportunity at the State House for zoning reform, I think one specific example of that is we could do a lot better with 40B and affordable housing legislation, because in a lot of communities what ends up happening is you have residents in a community feeling worried and scared because they don't have flexibility, and they don't feel like they have input to end up with a good final product in that eventual housing complex. So, it's unfortunate because you'll have people that want to see more affordable housing, but then they end up being on the other side of the argument because they feel like it's going to have unreasonable traffic impacts, or it's going to destroy, the watershed. And I think we can do better than that, and we need to address the reality that we need more affordable housing for young professionals or maybe seniors that want to downsize, but allow for local communities to have input on the final development.
Actually, following up on something that Bill raised was an excellent point. The cost of health care is prohibitive, and I've said during this campaign that when a business owner cannot afford health insurance for him or herself, how can we expect business owners to do the right thing for employees? The current system, and it has become the model for the nation, is certainly a step in the right direction. But I'm not sure the experts believe it's truly sustainable. And it may very well be that we're going to have to revisit this again and consider a single payer model. Because right now, we're already seeing the fixes to the program, and I think that the recent cost containment fixes were largely good ones to bring down the cost. But clearly, there's a sustainability issue that's going to have to be addressed, and that will help with the perception of the Commonwealth is too expensive to do business.
Everybody get their word in on this? We're all good with this question. I just want to remind everybody this is a Valley Patriot WCAP debate, WCAP radio. I see that the Eagle Tribune has come today. Welcome here. I guess I've really made it when the Eagle Tribune's finally covering me. Let's just say that out loud. Christine Morabito is my co-host for this debate, and this will be aired on WCAP sometime within the next week. We'll also have a podcast, and I want to thank Hector Montalvo, who is videotaping this for Methuen Cable Access. Gentlemen and lady, it seems though the Democrat Party and Democrats in general take a rap for being too big government, being too spendful, for lack of a better word, for spending too much money, for raising too much taxes. It's a rap that I think maybe the party in some degree has earned, and in others perhaps not. Dispel some of that for us. What part of state government would you like to see turned back over to the private sector? What is it that the private sector could do better that state government is doing now? There's got to be something in that multi-billion-dollar budget that gets passed by the legislature and signed by the governor that could be better done by somebody else, a nonprofit, a private company, anybody. Does anybody have any thoughts on that, or you know, what the government can get off of their back as far as an expense?
Well, the government
I know you guys climbing over each other to answer that.
took over, well, I mean, frankly, the private sector, it's just our capitalism model. If I see an opportunity as a business owner, I'll certainly go after it. So I think the private sector has pretty much left anything that's difficult or hard to make a profit out to the Commonwealth. And so I think the Commonwealth, in our case, is the only one that can provide these. But let's look back 40 years. Regional transit authorities were created to try to take care of where the private sector was leaving off, providing, you know, the private bus companies. And I think we've all noticed even today, we've also lost most of the taxi cabs. So the public sector did try to take care of where the private sector was leaving off with bus service. And when transit authorities were created, there was a specific component placed into the legislation to make sure that we didn't harm the private sector. And that is that although Merrimack Valley Regional Transit Authority, Lowell Regional Transit Authority, and others could buy fleets of buses and provide transportation, they were not allowed to operate them. And so that was supposed to go back to the local bus operators, who now no longer have a fleet expense, but can pick up and provide the bus service. Now what's happened though is that that's been completely co-opted. We've had whole new industries form, so now most of our transit authorities outsource out of state to now new giant bus companies, private sector, that were formed specifically for this purpose. So we can see how all of these things start out the right way and then become tangled. And I'm thinking in this case, there was one where the private sector, someone was watching out for them, but how by not revisiting the legislation, we allowed a new giant to form that's been very costly and inefficient. And in the case of transit authorities, I think very well, and this is part of the larger MBTA fix that was hinted at earlier. Mass Department of Transportation includes all of these entities: Mass Highway, the MBTA, the transit authorities. It may very well be that we have to look at a global, within that department, a solution to all of our separate infrastructure and transportation issues, and resolve by consolidating many of those separate agencies. We're going to find that we'll have less overhead if we combine some of the transit authorities, especially adjacent districts like Merrimack Valley and Lowell. Might even find that it's better for the consumer, who doesn't have to stop artificially at a border to change transportation modes. So again, I think the public sector is doing what the private sector doesn't want to do, but it isn't doing it very well.
Anybody else on what functions government is performing now that maybe could be turned over to someone else, so we're not bearing the burden?
There may be some ways you can, I think you're referring just to privatizing services that are currently provided by public employees.
Or turning them over to nonprofits or some other
Which is a
entity other than government.
de facto privatization, essentially. And I think that you can, or you can look to streamline. Government, quite honestly, sometimes has separate functions, not because of something you would design as a manager, but because of turf. So you could privatize some functions now. I don't quite want to go into which ones you could. I think you're going to talk about Pacheco then, and the Pacheco law is out there, and it's a whole nother subject. But I think bottom line is that again, where there's turf and you can consolidate by blowing apart these turf issues, even in localities, people don't realize that we looked at in Methuen the potential for combining the finance departments of the school department and the city. You might have thought that we were committing a heinous act, and laws are in place, quite frankly, to prevent that. We did consolidate school functions within human resources. which was allowed, and we've also consolidated purchasing. So rather than having 2 purchasing agents within the city of Methuen, currently there's 1. When I was the mayor, there was 1 human resources director for both sides. Some good to that, some bad to that, but I think essentially you need to look at ways to do more with less, and whether that be outsourcing some functions that may be subject to that is something that I'm not opposed to. But certainly I think there are today ways that we can consolidate some functions. I think Tim referenced it earlier. If you really went in and just did it from a strictly management point of view, you could probably be a lot more efficient, but this is not, again, a numbers game always. There's always a little bit of politics involved in it as well.
I think that there's progress to be made with agency and office efficiency. And I know that Steve Bedore did a great job when he was very much involved in the reorganization of the Department of Transportation and what is now MassDOT. And the motto was reform before revenue. And I know that there are a lot of pre-existing state agencies that are having their budgets slashed that could benefit. One in particular is the DEP, which has paltry budgets, and they have specific tasks. You know, I'm all about, you know, actual real work and tasks that need to be done. And to me, that's very tangible. And to see people that are doing good work out there in the communities, whether it's working with city halls to figure out how to reduce their bottom line on their solid waste fees, or they're supposed to you know, get lead paint out of old apartments, you know, like those are real things that need to happen. So when I see an agency like the DEP that's not getting the money they need, and it's all being spread too thinly for maybe some more inefficient programs, I think that there's room to make progress on that.
Anybody else? No, we're good. Christine?
We touched on healthcare a little bit, and I work as a nurse, and I can tell you that I spend a tremendous amount of time doing paperwork to keep from getting sued. I believe that one of the reasons that healthcare is so expensive is the very litigious society that we live in. You watch TV and every other commercial tells you how you can sue a pharmaceutical company or a doctor for something. In Texas, they enacted tort reform, and they had very good results with that. Basically, that meant you know, it limited the frivolous lawsuits, or if you brought a frivolous lawsuit, then you would have to pay the court fees. Is that something that you would be in favor of?
My understanding, I know, right? Everyone's looking at the lawyer. You know, my understanding is that in Massachusetts right now, you know, there are standards in place where you have to go before a board before you can proceed. And there are penalties for frivolous litigation. I got out of the litigation business because it is bleak and it is adversarial and incredibly ineffective when it comes to problem solving, you know. We have a vet. Our vet is swamped with paperwork. You know, I can't even imagine what you have to deal with as a nurse and doctors. And it's unfortunate. I mean, we have a pervasively, you know, troubled, for lack of a better word, healthcare system where it's so administratively heavy. I know that part of it is going to be, you know, having a buffer from litigation. What I'm concerned about is if we had to, you know, focus our energy on what the real issue is, I think that there's so much paperwork, maybe in part because people are cautious of litigation, but I think they're trying to cover themselves because there's so much lack of communication and complex paper shuffling and maybe systems that aren't in sync with each other, and everyone's trying to get their paperwork straight to make sure that they're covered. I think that that's the problem, is that it's unnecessarily complicated, and that we have systems. I mean, fortunately with the recent legislation that was passed, there's a mandate to make more of the records electronic. You know, that's a good thing. But everyone has experienced in their own lives, you know, duplicate tests or confusion where Administratively, we're dealing with insurance agencies more than we're dealing with patients, and it's an unfortunate misuse of time. I think that across the board, we need to figure out how to make it so that doctors and nurses are interacting more with healthcare and not with paper. But I don't think that, the brunt of the issue falls in the lap of having the ability for people to have recourse if they experience medical malpractice.
Well, the new,
I'm sorry, I think we've ruled that wasn't an answer.
I heard that, and I thought that's too bad. I guess that, I want to be as specific as I can, and what I'm trying to say, I'll try to be more succinct, is that I agree that it's wrong that you and other healthcare professionals have to spend so much time on paperwork. I think that if we have to figure out what's the main reason for that, to me personally, I think it's a red herring for litigation to be the main reason why healthcare providers' time is used so much in that way.
Tort reform, yes or no?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, the new Massachusetts cost containment law does provide a cooling off provision. Now, we have no idea how that's going to work, so we need to give that a chance. The cooling off period would say, okay, before any litigation, you have to wait. Put a waiting time on it. Maybe saner heads will prevail. I'd like to see if that does work. Now, the next part of that, though, if it weren't for some of these lawsuits, and I think it's a terrible business, and I think it's exploitative, but if it weren't for some of these, we probably wouldn't have some of the controls we have now. Now, most of us are benefiting now that when we get a prescription drug, the computer is watching it all the way down to the pharmacy level, whether that drug will interact with something else that you may have been prescribed, even by your dentist if they're on the network. So we wouldn't have some of those systems if it hadn't been for I'll call it the stove burn. You almost never do it twice. So you have to have a little bit of a threat to make sure you do things right. Now, how much? Let's see if the cooling off period works. Otherwise, we do have to look at tort reform, but not yet.
Okay, good.
I think nationally, when you talked about in Mass, and I think again Tim talks about the cooling off period, which is relatively new here, so we do need to look at that. But I think nationally, when we've talked about before President Obama managed to pass healthcare reform, as a Democrat, I would say to you that I would have been willing to put tort reform on the table, and I think that in many cases we do have lawsuits that don't merit. But a couple of things. Number one is, so the answer is yes, I would be willing to look at tort reform, but I think some of the proposals that I've seen have limits on them that we really need to look at. And I think you have to understand that, again, to say that every lawsuit against a medical provider is without merit is not true. And there have been, and we don't have to even bring them up here, but there have been many instances that we've seen where there have been atrocious instances of malpractice that deserve large awards. And we do not want to throw out the baby with the bathwater and say that we're going to put an artificial limit on all settlements, because I don't think one size fits all, particularly in that area where you have a really bad act of omission, works. Now, the other thing is, notwithstanding the paperwork issue, I think Republicans have argued that tort reform would be nationally one of the things that you could use to suppress costs. And I think that most people that have looked at that have said that at best, that if you enacted the most draconian type of tort reform, that you would be looking at a 1 or 2% nationally reduction in healthcare costs. And I think that's an accurate number. So I sympathize, and I think that we ought to look at it. But like most problems, they're not tort reform's not something that you can use, I think, as just a sort of a political slogan. There are real results, and real people have been hurt, and we ought not to stop those people from getting the awards that they deserve when they do deserve it.
May I give a small leverage?
Absolutely.
And the reason why I feel the way I do about tort reform not being at the top of the ticket in terms of addressing healthcare costs and fixing the administrative burden is what I have in mind is certainly not the legal industry or the lawyers. What I have in mind are the patients and the people. And I've seen in my own life the devastating impacts of the wrong medication with the wrong person. And, you know, like Bill said, where you only have one chance at a good education, you know, you only have one chance, that happens to rhyme, but with the right medication. And the stakes are high in healthcare. And, you know, and that's why we have to give such respect to the professionals in this field, because we are at their mercy when we're most vulnerable. So that's why I feel the way I do, because you know, these things are common, and it's not that there aren't people, like whether it's EBT cards or bankers on Wall Street, there are always going to be people that take advantage of measures that are in place to protect people. But that's why I feel the way I do.
Anybody else?
I just want to add, I don't think anyone's
I keep turning it off.
I don't think anyone's saying that there aren't situations where, yeah, there is absolutely, you know, warranted lawsuits. Absolutely. But the doctor, what I heard, the average doctor pays about $200,000 a year for malpractice insurance, and that's just general practitioners, let alone the specialists. And that's the test, the doctors that, you know, do a lot more serious work. I think that we're fooling ourselves to think that that doesn't trickle down, you know, into everybody. And it's not just the paperwork I do. We have administrators where I work that that's all they do is go back and make sure that I did the right paperwork. You know what I mean? So it's just a real trickle down effect that I think affects cost toward everybody.
So if you look at solutions to that, and some of the proposals, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions on party, at least on this issue, but some of the proposals at the federal level would have artificial caps on any award, notwithstanding what happened in the particular case. And I've seen some proposals, and I believe legislation has been filed, that could, for example, hold an award to $1 million or $1.5 million. And $1.5 million sounds like a lot. Maybe that's the right number, but is it really for all cases? If somebody has something done to them that mars them for life, is an artificial limit the right way to go? $1.5 million, $1 million, I think there have been even legislation filed for lower than that. So I think, you know, the devil is in the details, but certainly I don't think for some, caps like that would work.
Well, the other problem with caps is that unless they build in something to keep pace with inflation, we may very well have the same situation we have now with many large industries where, frankly, it's cheaper to pay that than to fix the core problem. So I'd be afraid of a cap that we didn't, if we went that direction, didn't go back and take a look at. And I don't know if I should turn this around, but since you're in healthcare, I mean, what do you think about this, the problem we have with people turning out healthcare practitioners? We have a shortage of seats in our community colleges for nurses, and we see, and I can't imagine that this doesn't add to healthcare costs, we see nurses having to work extra shifts and overtime because we have a shortage of staffing. It seems to me, I guess I'll answer my question, but you feel free to comment on it, that we need to address some of these professions, make sure there are seats in our classrooms, make sure that we are training nurses and other practitioners and all of the new health professions that we have. All the new technology means changes every year, and improve staffing and make sure that we also pay our employees what they're worth, because otherwise we're going to continue to have a turnover problem, especially among social workers and among other grades that work within our health facilities.
May I know I probably don't need to say may I at this point, I'll just speak. The one party that we haven't mentioned in this discussion, I think I want to learn more about, is the insurance industry and their model, because we're talking about the patients, we're talking about the doctors, but I think that I'd be interested in further analyzing the role of the insurers to make sure that they're playing fair and that medical professionals aren't kind of forced, for a lack of alternative, to having to pay more than they need to.
Can I just say, since you brought that up, another suggestion to bring down healthcare costs has been to, allow people to buy healthcare across state lines. There's virtually no other product that you can't buy it from another state. Why can't we buy insurance from another state? I think that would increase the competition, which would probably help prices go down. What do you think about that?
I mean, it sounds good, but what you tend to find with that, when you just peel the onion back a little bit, is that the states that allow catastrophic only insurance, what it does for you is it creates a situation where if you have a mandate, you have younger, healthier people crossing that state line to buy catastrophic or cheaper versions. But you have some older folks like myself, as Tom pointed out, maybe not as healthy, that can't do that for one reason or another. And I think that what you do is your pools get skewed. So I know it's been a Republican talking point that the crossing state lines and market forces will help. I don't think it would help as much as people think it would, and I certainly think that you have some legitimate issues there with your healthcare pool and seeing a flight of younger, healthy folks to low-cost, high-deductible, catastrophic-only policies. And it's something that is a real concern, because at that point, you're left with a market that really doesn't work in the state that might not sell those types of policies.
Anybody else?
Well, I mean, that's a good point, Bill. I mean, it's about not weakening the systems by just leaving the Commonwealth systems, existing systems, with a base that can't sustain itself. But you know what, I think a related reform is important. As an employer in a border community, I have had situations, and I'm sure many employers do, where an employee comes from New Hampshire, and the Massachusetts insurer won't provide insurance on that side of the border, and they're my employees. Now, we've gotten waivers for people who are very close to the border, a Hampshire or something. But this is a problem for employers, and it's an artificial barrier that needs to be addressed, because it means the employer now loses the economies of scale by having to buy a separate policy for one or two people who may be coming from the other side of the border. So I think it's a related reform that would help employers with their health insurance costs, and frankly, help the employees stay in the same networks and the same service areas. Anybody else on this topic?
I'll just say briefly that this is one of the topics where I don't know if necessarily whether it comes from a Democrat or a Republican matters so much. I think that this is something that we need to explore. I mean, we're looking for solutions that work, right? So if it doesn't work, well, then it'll be a pretty brief experiment. That's how I feel. We want to try things that work, and right now what we're doing isn't working. So my mind would be open to figuring out whether it's through figuring out how we create greater pools, or whether it's more competitive. We haven't solved it yet.
Okay, thank you. Because we started a little bit late, I'm going to ask one more question before I give you guys an opportunity to close. 298 laws in Massachusetts. I get an awful lot of calls on my radio program. I get an awful lot of emails as the publisher of the Valley Patriot from men who say that they have been deemed a criminal without being tried. That because of a false, or what they claim to be a false allegation, they have their name in a database that prevents them from getting a job working in a school or working in certain types of industries. it really seems somewhat anti-constitutional to have a law that punishes somebody without having to have a trial. What are your thoughts about 209A reform as has been proposed over the last couple of years by some of the fatherhood groups and some of the more conservative groups? I know as Democrats you're supposed to say bad things about conservatives and Republicans are supposed to be evil, but sometimes they do have good ideas. I think this might be one of them, and I'd like your thoughts.
I mean, look, in terms of the evil thing, I have never said that about conservatives or Republicans, just you. So, I mean, let's be clear about that. I think you need to, 209A serves an important purpose. And again, if you could amplify on that, it might help me. I don't know about my colleagues, but the 209A issue, I believe, is there to get people off the street or prevent additional potentially violence from happening. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, you're talking about a restraining order.
Well, yes, I'm talking about a restraining order, but it's only on the word of the accused, and it's only in the
Issued by a judge.
yeah, well, issued by a judge on the word of the accused.
But
I'm sorry, of the accuser.
On the word of the accuser, but I think without going into the 209A, I mean, both parties are before a judge. The judge has discretion to grant the 209A or not grant it. Would you agree with that?
In all fairness, I've sat in many courtrooms, Mr. Mayor, and have almost never seen them not issue the 209A, just because of, as one judge put it a few weeks ago, erring on the side of caution because what if? And I'm not really sure that I'm comfortable, and I'm interested in your thoughts as to whether you're comfortable about criminalizing what someone might do because of what if.
I'm not sure that's an accurate depiction of a 209A order. I stand corrected if it is, but I mean, I assume that you're telling me that if I walk into a court and go before a judge and say that Tim wanted to hit me over the head, that he would grant a restraining order immediately.
Well, if you were a woman, I would say that would probably be the case.
Well, I don't know that that's accurate. I'm not a lawyer. I have not been in court to see 209As. I do know this, that in many cases, what we've seen is, over the past 20 years, many instances of horrific acts of domestic violence against females. And so I think 209A was designed to prevent serial abusers or abusers from being able to continue that and afford a woman an avenue to get protection from somebody that may be abusing her. So I don't want to say any more than that, but I think the intent of 209A is a good intent.
I am curious, as the rest of you finish this final round of questioning, it seems as though during all of these questions, whether it was here or on my WCAP program, you always seem to err on the side of, well, what about that small percentage of people who might not be abusing EBT cards, might not be abusing the system, might not be, we're making them feel bad, we're isolating them, we're demonizing them. Yet here in this instance, where the intent of the law was wonderful, and many women are able to escape abusive situations because of 209As, there also is that component of men, or women in some cases, or men on men in some cases of gay relationships, where the accusation alone criminalizes what the other person might do with no evidence whatsoever. And we saw this with the passing of the Violence Against Women Act. And I'm just wondering if you could work that into some of your answers, because I think it's really an interesting topic.
Well, really, there are two parts to what you've asked. And Hector Montalvo asked the same question on his program. There should not be a presumption over the long term that a particular parent or a particular gender is at fault. And I think that's what you're really saying. There shouldn't be a presumption. However, where there is a threat, we can't take a chance, especially the news lately. We can't take a chance and not issue a restraining order. So I don't have a problem right now with the current system of issuing a restraining order out of an abundance of caution, because we've seen some really horrible crimes. That being said, the second part of your question is, you're saying this stays on someone's record when nothing has been proven either way. I agree with you there. We have a system of checks and balances, a presumption of innocence, and I don't see why that can't be applied. But in the initial threat stage, we have to act with an abundance of caution. But over the remaining time, whether it's a review by a judge or whatever, that if there have been no other incidents, perhaps it just falls off the record like it would with a juvenile, for example. Yeah, so there are two parts of this. We need the protections, we can't take the chances. On the other hand, no one should have their reputation scarred for life over an allegation that was unfounded.
Tim stole
The
my,
female lawyer in the room?
he stole my thunder. What I wanted to do was break down the two issues and talk about how the fact that they're available and they're issued is something that's a good thing. And, you know, unfortunately, and this happens, sometimes restraining orders don't work, right? They're issued, but they are just a piece of paper. And, you know, that's the only thing that is standing between potential violence. But then there's the whole other issue of, you know, that is slapped on a person, and, you know, these things expire, right? So, Hector is shaking his head no. I mean, and they expire.
Well, the effect of it expires,
Right,
but it
that's
stays on your record
right.
forever. I've never,
Right.
I've been fortunate enough never to have had that problem, but I have friends who have teaching degrees, who have ex-girlfriends who made accusations, and they can't work in a school.
And I appreciate the clarification. What I was saying is that the protection of it expires after a
Yes.
certain date. So if that expires and then the person who initially asked for it doesn't go back for it to be reissued, then why wouldn't that be the parallel impact on the person who it was brought up against?
I agree. I
Any other
think,
thoughts?
well, you split the issue in two,
Mhm.
and certainly presumption of innocence is the cornerstone of our system. And as you asked the question, it appeared to me that you want to presume everyone is innocent, and that's great, but I think in terms of, as Tim pointed out, the cooling off period, certainly I think that our responsibility is to err on the side of caution. For the longer term, I don't believe that there would be anyone that would say that something that had sort of drifted away ought to remain on someone's permanent record or be an impediment to future employment. But
So you all pretty much agree that the 209A system for the immediate threat needs to remain the way that it is, but as time goes on, if the person hasn't exhibited any violence, made any additional threats, that's not something that should remain on their record. What are you guys going to do, just real quickly, when whichever one of you win, because we know the Democrats are probably going to win this seat, it's a predominant Democrat district, what are you going to do when your party comes to you and says, oh, no, the trial attorneys and all the lobbyists have said we can't go in this direction? Are you willing to buck your own party to push that? Are you willing to buck your own party to stand up for what you've all just committed to?
Across the board, I'm willing to be my own person and buck a party trend. No matter who the next state senator is, they're going to be the junior senator, but you want to be effective when you get in there. And I think that you have to. I mean, that's just always been my mentality. I mean, I am a Democrat, but I'm also my own person and have a set of values and strategies to get things done on Beacon Hill, and that's how I would legislate.
I wouldn't run if I didn't think I could affect change. As I mentioned before, I fought a 3-year battle against a federal law, the Defense of Marriage Act, and every lawyer, every expert said there was no way I would win. And I just don't like taking no for an answer. And we fought and we fought and we made contacts and we won. And I wouldn't run for office if I didn't think I could be as effective. And let's face it, I'm not sure where the worst office is, in the basement behind a janitor, or on the 4th floor I keep hearing is a bad place. Well, you know, we're going to start there, so we'll just have to, you know, we'll make do. I just can't see siding with leadership on things that would work against my district or against my core concerns. That being said, compromise is certainly something that's missing in Washington, and I don't want to create such divisions in our State House over minor matters. So when it's important, when it's serious, I will buck the leadership.
I was really more worried about Billy Manzi on that
Well,
one.
actually, isn't it true, though, that mostly nationally, I think less so on Beacon Hill, but that what you've seen is hyper-partisanship leading to effective gridlock, where nothing gets done, so that we're in a 365-day-a-year campaign, and that rank and file members do not buck their parties. Rank and file members essentially fall into line. And I think that's been part of the problem for both parties. And I've already said today, I think, two things that may get me in a little bit of trouble.
I'm hoping.
With the Democrat. I know that, and I know that's why you asked the questions, but I said that I would be willing to look at lifting the cap on charter schools. That's not a Democratic position. And I also said I'd be willing to look at tort reform. That is also not a Democratic
But you
position.
look at it, and that's kind of political code for.
I believe that you could effectuate some tort reform that makes sense. And so I think both of those are not standard Democratic positions, and I think we need to do more after elections to govern. During the course of campaigns and elections, particularly between the parties, I think it's pretty healthy to have a hard go at it and show everybody the differences between the parties. And I think right now, there have never been greater divisions between the parties. We need to talk about those, put forth solutions as Democrats and Republicans, and see where the public wants to go. But after that process is done, don't we have an obligation to work together, if neither party controls all the levers of government, to get things done for the people that we represent? That's what's missing. And I'm willing to buck leadership. I'm willing to say things that the Democratic Party doesn't like, and I'm certainly willing to say things that the Republican Party doesn't like.
We've noticed that.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we've exhausted this issue, I want to give everybody an opportunity. This very well could be the last thing people see on Methuen cable access. I'm going to be bicycling this to other communities, to North Andover and other communities. So this very well could be the last thing before people vote in your race that they view. So could you each take, and I'm not going to time it, just be respectful, can you each just take a few minutes to tell people why in the Democrat primary they should be voting not for Billy Manzi and not for Katie Eyes, but for Tim Coco, and vice versa all the way around? You try to mix it up. Give us some good sound bites.
Starting with me.
You can start with whoever chooses to start. This is true freedom here. True freedom here.
Everyone look this way. Well, the word progressive has been maligned, but I think that it's what our residents in our district are really looking for, is someone to protect their livelihoods. We've seen the middle incomes in the middle classes and seniors take a real hit over the last 30 years, and progressive values are what we need to restore their confidence and restore the vitality of our district. Now, I've been endorsed by, as I said at the outset, a number of progressive organizations, the Social Workers, the Progressive Democrats of Massachusetts, Mass Equality, and others. And these are family values. These are things that lift our entire communities. I'd like to seek winning combinations and not divisiveness. And so I'm very proud to have been endorsed, again, by former Senator Sharon Pollard from Methuen and former State Representative Barbara Hill of Amesbury, who looked outside of their districts and made what I think is a courageous decision to look outside of geography and support the candidate they thought would best deliver those values to the district.
I'll go in order. Thanks. I think that residents in all of our communities in the district are frustrated with government at large, and I'm excited about this opportunity to be the next state senator because I think that there's a chance to change the definition of what it means to be a politician. In my mind, on the Newburyport City Council, that's being a negotiator, it's trying to be diplomatic, it's being a communicator, It's being very responsive to residents. And I see a lot of parallels between my work on the city council and what the next state senator would have to do. I also think it's important to emphasize that it shouldn't matter what community you're from, what city you're from.